Hi, my name is Mike. I'm the host of a radio show called It's About to Get Interesting on Music from the 4012 Radio. We can call this a companion piece. Memphis Mike's Interesting People. Stay tuned. August 9th, 2023, Episode 1. A guy from Detroit. A guy from Detroit died today. He was 81 years old. A quiet, humble man. Most of you have probably never heard of him. Some of you have. He was a very wise man, I'll tell you that. I'll give you a couple quotes from this very wise, humble man. There's no shame in hard work. There's no shame in being poor. Poor doesn't mean dirty. Poor doesn't mean stupid. Poor does not mean mean. His name was Sixto. He was the sixth child of working-class immigrant parents. He grew up poor. He was poor most of his life. He raised a family. He worked construction. He managed to get a degree in philosophy. He ran for public office a few times. He ran for mayor of Detroit, I believe for a state representative position in Michigan. He lost, but he ran for all of the right reasons. He ran for office to do his part, to improve the day-to-day life of everyone in his community. That's a noble act, okay? But there's a lot more to the story. As a young man, Sixto learned to play guitar. He was a good singer, and he enjoyed writing songs. And as any child of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and on can probably understand, he wanted that taste of the spotlight. He wanted to be a rock star. And he almost got it. At first. He got the big recording contract. Released 2 albums. The critics loved them. They likened him to Bob Dylan. But no matter how much the critics loved him, it wasn't enough to get people to buy his records in the United States. So back to work Sixto went, doing back-breaking day labor. But that's not the end of the story. In the late 70s, apparently a shipment of unsold records made their way to Australia. They sold very, very well. And he ended up doing a couple tours of Australia. playing to crowds of 15,000 people. It seemed like his ship had come in. Another tour happened 2 years later. In between the two tours, he was still working that day job, raising his family. He had bought a dilapidated house in an auction for $50, and he was using his construction skills to make it livable for the family. Second tour came and went. So did his moment in the spotlight. And as he said during an encore at a show in Sydney, I believe, and 8 years later, it was almost 20 years later, one of his daughters was looking on the internet and came across a website about her father from South Africa. Apparently, her father was bigger than Elvis, the Beatles, or the Rolling Stones in South Africa. No one has ever been able to figure out what happened to those royalty checks. But like most musicians, most artists, it's not done for the money. It's done because you love it. So after some back and forth, Sixto was invited to South Africa for a series of shows. This humble man and his daughters flew to South Africa. When they got off the plane, they saw limousines waiting, and they just guessed that they were for some important dignitary or someone that they should stay out of the way of. It turned out those limousines were for Sixto and his daughters. Simply put, they had arrived. Playing to packed houses, and I mean large, large crowds. This wise, humble man took to the stage to 10 minutes of non-stop applause. It seems that for years there had been a rumor in South Africa that this wise, humble man, broken by the American music industry, had killed himself. There were rumors that he had shot himself on stage, set himself on fire on stage, any number of things, none of which were true. And that first crowd in South Africa, standing to their full height, screaming his name, screaming for their favorite song for 10 solid minutes, they got to connect with a legend, a myth, a ghost. He had been the soundtrack of a generation. The younger folks were just now discovering him. And this wise, humble man took it all in stride. He played his heart out again and again and again, and then came home and did more construction work. Some years later, a film was made about this man. Actually, there were two. One was called Dead Men Don't Tour, and there was an Oscar-winning film, Searching for Sugar Man. I remember my former boss, who hadn't been my boss for over a year. She was from Africa herself, Kenya, I believe. And she called me out of the blue, "You have to see this movie." I reminded her that she was no longer my boss and couldn't tell me what to do, but I appreciated the suggestion. And we had a nice little conversation. And then that weekend, my girlfriend and I went to see the movie, and it was like a fairy tale come true. But the amazing thing about this wise, humble man, once the royalty checks and performance fees started to come in, you want to know what he did with that money? He gave most of it away. Friends and family, anyone who really needed it, he gave it to them. I saw an interview with one of his daughters, and she says, no, he probably won't buy a Maserati, but I really wish he would get a new pair of glasses. Sixto Rodriguez died today. The world has lost a quiet, wise, humble man who was also an amazing singer and songwriter. If you get a chance, look up his music. I think you'll enjoy it. Until next time.